They called him the cold king of Manhattan, a billionaire untouched by desire and unmoved by beauty, broken in ways no doctor could explain. But the moment a Jamaican janitor with caramel skin and gentle eyes stepped into his penthouse with a mop bucket, the impossible happened. His heart remembered how to beat. His body remembered how to feel. And for the first time in 5 years, Paul Walker was terrifyingly, undeniably alive. Manhattan's skyline glittered beneath him like scattered diamonds. Paul Walker stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, a tumbler of bourbon in hand, but he didn't see the city. 35 years old, chiseled jawline, shoulders broad enough to carry empires. Forbes had called his wealth staggering. Tech Insider had dubbed him the genius who built tomorrow. Yet none of it mattered. Women had always been part of his world. Supermodels who knew every angle of their perfect faces. Actresses whose bodies were insured for millions. Heiresses who whispered promises in dimly lit restaurants. But for 5 long years, his body had remained silent. Doctors blamed stress. Therapists suggested trauma. Specialists prescribed pills that did nothing but mock him from bathroom counters. Paul knew the truth. He wasn't stressed. He wasn't traumatized. He was simply dead inside. That night, well past 11, he finally left his office and stepped into the hallway leading to his private quarters. The penthouse stretched vast and silent around him, marble floors gleaming under recessed lighting. He loosened his tie, exhaustion pressing against his temples like iron hands. Then he heard it, a soft voice, barely above a whisper, humming something melodic and warm. Gospel music with Caribbean roots. He turned the corner and stopped breathing. There she was, Anna Sinclair, the new janitor. She moved slowly down the corridor, pushing a yellow mop bucket, earbuds trailing from her ears. Her hair was pulled into a loose puff with tight curls escaping around her temples. Caramel skin caught the light as she worked, her black cleaning uniform simple and practical. She hadn't noticed him yet, lost in her rhythm, her voice carrying that hymn like a prayer. Then her eyes lifted. Their gazes collided. She gasped, stumbling slightly, her hand flying to her chest. "Oh, Mr. Walker, I didn't know anyone was still here," she stammered, her voice carrying the lilting accent of Kingston. The night manager said the floor was empty. Paul should have said something professional, something distant the way he always did with staff. He should have nodded politely and walked past. But he couldn't move. His eyes locked on her, his chest suddenly tight. His pulse, dormant for so long, slammed against his ribs like a prisoner trying to escape. And then it happened. Heat flooded through him, sharp and undeniable, surging through veins that had run cold for years. His breath quickened. His hands flexed at his sides. And deep in his core, something stirred, something that had been silent, dormant, dead. His body was responding. Paul gripped the edge of a nearby console table, his knuckles white. His mind reeled in shock. Impossible. For 5 years, the world's most beautiful women, professionally trained in seduction, hadn't drawn even a flicker from him. Yet here he stood in his own hallway, undone by a janitor with a mop bucket and earbuds. Anna shifted uncomfortably under his stare, her eyes darting to the floor. Should I come back later, sir?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling with nervous respect. Paul cleared his throat, forcing words through the chaos in his chest. "No," he said, but his voice came out hoarse, strangled. He swallowed hard and tried again. "No, keep working. I was just leaving." She nodded quickly, pulling the mop bucket to the side to let him pass. But as he walked by, careful not to brush against her, the faint scent of her wrapped around him. Coconut oil and lavender soap, something simple, something real. His chest burned. When he reached the doorway to his suite, he glanced back. She had already returned to her work, humming softly again, completely unaware of the earthquake she had just caused. Paul stepped inside and closed the door, pressing his back against it as though holding the world at bay. His hand moved to his chest, feeling the wild, restless rhythm of a heart that hadn't beaten like this in half a decade. It only happened with her. The realization struck like thunder splitting the sky. No glamorous woman at charity galas. No actress on red carpets. No heiress in penthouse suites. Only Anna Sinclair, the janitor who had no idea what power she held over him. For the first time in 5 years, Paul Walker felt alive. And that terrified him more than anything money could never fix. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to click subscribe, because tomorrow I'll be dropping another unforgettable story you won't want to miss. Now back to the story. The penthouse was silent again. Paul didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Anna's face materialized behind his eyelids like a photograph burned into his retinas. The way her curls had framed her temples. The startled widening of her eyes when their gazes met. The nervous flutter of her fingers against her chest. He turned onto his side, then his back, then sat up abruptly, running both hands through his hair. This was madness. She was just a woman, a janitor, someone he'd passed in a hallway for 30 seconds. Nothing more. Yet his body still hummed with the memory of her presence. His pulse still kicked whenever he recalled the scent of coconut oil and lavender. His chest still tightened when he heard the echo of her hymn in his mind. It was stress, he muttered to the darkness, his voice rough and unconvincing. Exhaustion playing tricks. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. By the time dawn broke over Manhattan, painting his penthouse in shades of gold and amber, Paul had convinced himself of nothing except that he needed to see her again. Just to prove it had been his imagination. Just to confirm that his reaction had been a fluke, a momentary glitch in a system that had been offline for too long. Just to breathe normally again. At 7:30, Paul emerged from his suite earlier than usual. He told himself it was to review quarterly reports before his morning meeting. He told himself it had nothing to do with the fact that the night cleaning crew typically worked until 8. He moved through the hallway with purposeful strides, his tailored charcoal suit immaculate, his expression carefully neutral. Then he saw her. Anna knelt near the elevator bank, scrubbing at a scuff mark on the marble floor. Her back was to him, her movements methodical and focused. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning her caramel skin luminous. Paul's steps faltered. His breath caught in his throat. Heat rushed through him instantly, fiercer than before, undeniable and overwhelming. His pulse hammered. His hands clenched at his sides. Every nerve in his body lit up, as though she had flipped a switch only she could reach. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real. Anna must have sensed his presence, because she glanced over her shoulder. When she saw him, she scrambled to her feet quickly, smoothing her uniform. "Good morning, Mr. Walker," she said, her voice soft and respectful. Her accent wrapped around his name like music. "I'll move out of your way, sir." "No," Paul said too quickly, too sharply. He cleared his throat, forcing his tone to soften. "You're fine. Keep working." But he didn't move. He stood there, rooted to the spot, his eyes drinking in every detail. The way her uniform fit neatly against her frame. The small gold cross that hung at her throat. The way she bit her lower lip nervously under his gaze. Anna shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tightening around the handle of her scrub brush. Is there something you need, sir?" "Yes," his mind screamed. "I need to understand what you're doing to me." "No," he said aloud, his voice strained. "Nothing." Yet still he didn't walk away. A beat of tense silence stretched between them. Anna's eyes darted toward the elevator, then back to him, wary and uncertain. She took a small step backward. "I should finish this section before the morning staff arrives," she said carefully, her tone still polite but edged with caution. Paul forced himself to nod. "Of course." He made his legs move, walking past her toward the private elevator. But as he did, the faint scent of her soap reached him again, and his chest constricted so violently he had to press a hand against the elevator wall to steady himself. When the doors closed, sealing him inside, Paul exhaled shakily, his reflection staring back at him from the polished steel. His jaw was tight. His eyes were dark with something he hadn't seen in them for years. Hunger. 2 hours later, Paul sat in his corner office at Walker Technologies, staring at financial projections on his monitor without seeing a single number. His assistant, Margaret, a sharply dressed woman in her 50s, appeared in the doorway with a tablet. "Mr. Walker, the marketing team is ready for your 10 o'clock. "Cancel it," Paul said flatly. Margaret blinked in surprise. "Sir, they've been preparing this presentation for 3 weeks. Reschedule." His tone left no room for argument. She hesitated, then nodded and retreated. Paul leaned back in his leather chair, pressing his fingers to his temples. He needed to test himself. He needed to prove that whatever had happened with Anna wasn't exclusive to her. It couldn't be. That would be insane. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, past business associates and board members, until he reached a name he hadn't called in months. Vivienne Rousseau. French supermodel. Legs for days. Face that launched perfume campaigns. She'd made her interest in him abundantly clear at a charity auction last year. He typed quickly, "Dinner tonight? 8 p.m. Her response came within 30 seconds. Finally. "I thought you'd never ask." "Where?" Paul named an exclusive restaurant in Tribeca and set his phone down, exhaling slowly. Tonight, he would prove to himself that his body wasn't broken anymore, that any beautiful woman could stir him now. That Anna Sinclair was simply the catalyst, not the exception. The restaurant was everything money could buy. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters who moved like shadows. Vivian arrived in a crimson dress that clung to every curve, her blonde hair swept elegantly over one shoulder. "Paul," she purred, leaning across the table to kiss both his cheeks, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. "You look devastatingly handsome tonight." "Thank you," he said, pulling out her chair with practiced courtesy. Throughout dinner, Vivian touched his arm, laughed at his comments, leaned forward so he could see the neckline of her dress. Her leg brushed his under the table. Her eyes promised everything. Paul felt nothing. No quickening pulse. No surge of heat. No stirring response. Just cold, empty silence. By the time dessert arrived, untouched, Paul's jaw was clenched so tight it ached. Vivian excused herself to the restroom, trailing her fingers across his shoulders as she passed. Still nothing. He sat alone at the table, his hands pressed flat against the pristine white cloth, his chest heavy with dawning horror. When Vivian returned, he made an excuse about an early morning meeting. She looked disappointed but kissed him goodnight outside the restaurant, pressing her body against his. Paul felt only the chill of the October wind. Back in his penthouse, well past midnight, Paul stood at his bedroom window staring at the city below. His reflection stared back at him, hollow-eyed and haunted. He had tested himself. He had surrounded himself with beauty, with seduction, with every physical promise a man could want. And he had felt absolutely nothing. But this morning, when Anna Sinclair had glanced over her shoulder with those gentle brown eyes, his entire body had roared to life. Paul pressed his forehead against the cool glass, his breath fogging the window. "It's only her," he whispered into the darkness, his voice breaking with the weight of a truth he couldn't escape. Why only her? Paul Walker had built his empire on precision. Every meeting scheduled to the minute. Every decision calculated for maximum efficiency. His life ran like the algorithms his company coded. Logical, predictable, controlled. Until Anna Sinclair shattered his system entirely. It started small. Innocent adjustments that he told himself meant nothing. On Tuesday morning, instead of leaving for the office at 7 sharp as he had for the past decade, Paul lingered in his penthouse until 7:45. He told himself he needed to review contracts. But when Anna appeared in the hallway with her cleaning cart, pushing it quietly toward the guest suites, his pulse kicked violently. He stepped out of his office just as she passed. "Good morning, Mr. Walker," she said softly, her eyes lowering respectfully. "Morning," he managed, his voice rougher than intended. Their eyes met for barely 3 seconds before she continued down the hall. But those 3 seconds burned through him like wildfire. Wednesday, he invented a reason to return home at lunch. The penthouse was empty except for Anna, who was dusting the library shelves. She stood on a small stepladder, reaching for the highest row, completely absorbed in her work. Paul stood in the doorway watching. The curve of her neck, the concentration on her face, the way she hummed under her breath. Always hymns, always something that sounded like home. She turned suddenly and gasped when she saw him. "Mr. Walker, I didn't hear you come in, sir." "I forgot some documents," he lied smoothly. "Don't let me disturb you." But he didn't move. He stood there, his eyes fixed on her, until she grew so uncomfortable she climbed down from the ladder and excused herself to another room. By Thursday, Paul had completely abandoned his routine. He worked from home more than the office. He took calls from his penthouse study instead of the boardroom. He found reasons to walk through rooms Anna was cleaning. The dining hall, the corridor, the expansive living room with its panoramic city views. Each time their paths crossed, his body responded with the same overwhelming intensity. Each time, Anna grew more nervous under his gaze. And each time, Paul felt himself slipping further into something he couldn't name and couldn't control. Anna knelt on the thin prayer mat in her tiny studio apartment in the Bronx, her hands folded tightly, her eyes squeezed shut. "Father God," she whispered, her voice trembling in the dim lamplight. "Please help me understand what's happening." The small room was simple. A narrow bed with a worn quilt from Jamaica. A wooden dresser holding her few possessions. A framed photo of her mother and younger brother back in Kingston. The air smelled faintly of the curry she'd made for dinner. But her mind was miles away, trapped in the gleaming corridors of Paul Walker's penthouse. "He looks at me, Lord," she continued, her accent thickening with emotion. "He looks at me like I'm something more than what I am. And I don't understand it. I don't understand why." She thought of his eyes, those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her uniform, past her status, into something deeper. The way his jaw tightened when she spoke. The way his hands flexed at his sides as though fighting some invisible battle. "He's my employer," she whispered. "A rich man. A powerful man. And I'm just—" She trailed off, pressing her hands harder together. But the truth she couldn't speak aloud, the truth that terrified her most, was that she felt something too. A pull she had no right to feel. A flutter in her chest whenever he appeared unexpectedly. A warmth that spread through her when their eyes met. "Keep my heart pure, Father," she prayed desperately. "Don't let me be foolish. Don't let me forget who I am." But even as she prayed, Paul Walker's face haunted her thoughts. Friday afternoon, Paul stood in the penthouse kitchen, pretending to review emails on his phone. In reality, he was waiting. Anna entered carrying supplies to restock the cleaning closet. When she saw him, she froze momentarily, then continued forward with visible caution. "Excuse me, Mr. Walker," she said quietly, moving around him to reach the storage area. Paul didn't move aside. He stood exactly where he was, close enough that she had to squeeze past him. Her shoulder brushed his arm for the briefest second. Electricity shot through him. Anna inhaled sharply, her eyes darting up to his face before quickly looking away. Her hands trembled slightly as she set bottles on the shelf. "Anna," he said, her name feeling foreign and intimate on his tongue. She turned slowly, her expression guarded. "Yes, sir?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he possibly say? "You've awakened something in me I thought was dead. I can't stop thinking about you. My entire world has narrowed to the moments when you're near." "Nothing," he said finally, his voice tight. "Carry on." But neither of them moved. The kitchen felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. The silence between them stretched taut like a wire about to snap. Anna lowered her gaze first, her cheeks darkening. "I should finish my work, sir." She slipped past him quickly, her footsteps hurrying down the hallway. Paul gripped the granite counter, his knuckles white, his breathing unsteady. This was spiraling. He was losing control. And the terrifying truth was that he didn't want to stop. Across town at Walker Technologies, Paul's executive assistant Margaret sat in the staff lounge, stirring sugar into her coffee. Across from her, Jennifer Chun from Human Resources leaned forward conspiratorially. "Have you noticed Mr. Walker lately?" Jennifer asked, her voice low. Margaret glanced up, her expression neutral. "In what way?" "He's been different. Distracted. He canceled 3 major meetings this week." Jennifer paused, then added carefully. "And he's been spending an unusual amount of time at home." Margaret said nothing, but her eyes sharpened. "I heard from building security," Jennifer continued, "that he's been requesting access logs for the penthouse cleaning schedule, specifically asking about evening shifts." "That's odd," Margaret admitted slowly. What neither woman knew was that across the lounge, near the coffee station, stood Vanessa Cole, Paul's former personal secretary, recently demoted after a disastrous quarterly report she'd mismanaged. Vanessa had once harbored fantasies about becoming more than Paul's employee, fantasies he'd never acknowledged. She stood frozen, her coffee cup halfway to her lips, her ears attuned to every word. Cleaning schedule. Evening shifts. Her mind worked quickly, connecting dots. The new night janitor. That young Jamaican girl with the shy smile. The one Paul had specifically requested be given extended penthouse access. Vanessa's jaw tightened, jealousy flaring hot and vicious in her chest. She turned and walked away quickly, but her mind was already spinning, already crafting the story she would whisper to the right people. That evening, Paul stood on his penthouse balcony, the October wind biting through his shirt. Below him, the city pulsed with life. Traffic, lights, millions of people pursuing their own desires, their own obsessions. He thought of Anna in her small apartment somewhere in the Bronx, probably kneeling in prayer, unaware of the chaos she'd created inside him. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Lunch this Sunday?" "The club." He ignored it. Another buzz. His board chair. "We need to discuss Q4 projections." Ignored. All he could think about was Monday morning, when Anna would return, when he would see her again, when his body would remember what it felt like to be alive. Inside the building, 40 floors below, Vanessa Cole sat at her desk long after everyone else had left. Her fingers flew across her keyboard, composing an email to 3 carefully selected colleagues. Subject: something everyone should know about Mr. Walker. She hit send, her lips curving into a satisfied smile. The first whisper had been planted, and whispers, once started, never stayed quiet for long. The invitation had been sitting on Paul's desk for weeks. The Manhattan Winter Gala, an evening of elegance and philanthropy. Black tie, $5,000 a plate. The kind of event where billionaires mingled with celebrities, where business deals were sealed over champagne, where the world's most beautiful women competed for attention in gowns worth more than most people's cars. Paul had planned to skip it, as he had every social event for the past 5 years. But on Saturday morning, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, he made a decision. He needed to test himself one more time. Properly this time. Vivian had been a single data point, an isolated failure. But a room full of the world's elite women? If he felt nothing there, in that environment specifically designed to intoxicate the senses, then he would know for certain. The truth he'd been running from would become undeniable. The Plaza Hotel ballroom glittered like something from a fever dream. Crystal chandeliers cascaded light across marble floors. Ice sculptures depicted Greek gods. A string quartet played Vivaldi while white-gloved waiters circulated with trays of champagne and caviar. Paul stood near the bar in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his presence drawing immediate attention. Within minutes, he was surrounded. Paul Walker, a throaty voice purred. A woman in an emerald gown approached, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo. "I didn't think you attended these anymore." He recognized her vaguely. An actress. Someone who'd won an Oscar or been nominated for one. "Last-minute decision," he said smoothly, accepting a glass of scotch from the bartender. She moved closer, her hand resting on his forearm. "I'm glad you changed your mind." Her perfume was expensive. Her smile was practiced. Her touch was deliberate. Paul felt absolutely nothing. Another woman joined them, this one a tech heiress in silver silk that left little to the imagination. She laughed at something the actress said, then turned her attention to Paul, her eyes bold and inviting. "Dance with me," she suggested, not quite asking. He allowed her to lead him to the dance floor, aware of dozens of eyes following them. Her body pressed against his as they moved to the music. Her hand slid up his chest. Her lips hovered near his ear, whispering something flattering and suggestive. Paul's heart remained steady, his breathing unchanged, his body completely unresponsive. Throughout the evening, it continued. A Brazilian model in red, a British socialite in midnight blue, a venture capitalist's daughter who cornered him by the ice sculptures and made her availability abundantly clear. Each one was stunning. Each one was willing. Each one made his chest feel colder and emptier than before. By 11 o'clock, Paul stood on the hotel's outdoor terrace, alone, gripping the stone railing hard enough to hurt. The city sprawled beneath him, indifferent to his silent crisis. He'd tested himself thoroughly. Surrounded by beauty, wealth, and blatant seduction, he'd felt nothing but a hollow ache where desire should have been. 5 years of this. 5 years of being dead inside, and for 1 week, one woman had made him feel alive again, only to prove that she was the exception, not the cure. Paul pulled out his phone and called his driver. "Bring the car around. I'm leaving." The penthouse was dark when he arrived home, just after midnight. Paul loosened his bow tie, shrugging out of his tuxedo jacket as he moved through the hallway. The silence pressed against him, familiar and suffocating. He was halfway to his bedroom when he heard it. A soft voice, gentle and melodic, humming. Paul froze, his entire body going rigid. The sound came from the living room. He moved toward it slowly, his heart beginning to accelerate, his breath growing shallow. Anna stood on a stepladder near the floor-to-ceiling windows, wiping down the glass with a microfiber cloth. She wore her simple black uniform, her hair pulled back, her feet bare because she'd removed her work shoes to avoid scuffing the furniture. She hummed as she worked, that same hymn from the first night. Something about grace and mercy, words he couldn't quite make out but could feel in his chest. She hadn't heard him enter. Paul stood in the doorway, and the reaction was instantaneous and devastating. He'd exploded through him. fiercer than anything at the gala. His pulse roared in his ears. His chest tightened so violently he couldn't breathe. Every nerve in his body ignited, screaming, demanding. His manhood stirred with an intensity that nearly brought him to his knees. Anna turned slightly, adjusting her position on the ladder, still lost in her work and her song. Paul grabbed the doorframe, his knuckles white, his legs suddenly unsteady. His vision blurred at the edges. He tried to inhale but couldn't pull enough air into his lungs. For 3 hours, he'd been surrounded by women who made careers out of being desired. Women who knew every trick, every angle, every seductive word. Nothing but 5 seconds of Anna Sinclair humming in his living room. And his body responded like a man who'd been drowning and just broke the surface. "Oh!" Anna gasped, finally noticing him. The cloth slipped from her hand, falling to the floor. "Mr. Walker, I didn't know you were home, sir. I'll come back later, Don't," he said hoarsely, the single word scraping from his throat. She froze on the ladder, her eyes wide, her hand gripping the top rung. Paul forced himself to straighten, though his entire body trembled with the effort of restraint. He released the doorframe slowly, his hands shaking. "Keep working," he managed, though his voice barely functioned. "I was just checking the security system." A transparent lie. They both knew it. Anna descended the ladder carefully, her movements uncertain. She bent to retrieve the fallen cloth, and Paul had to turn away, pressing his palm against the wall, his eyes squeezed shut. "Sir, are you feeling well?" Her voice carried genuine concern. "Should I call someone?" "No," he said sharply. Then softer, "No. I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. He was unraveling. Everything he'd built, the control, the distance, the walls, was crumbling. He heard her gathering her supplies, her footsteps moving toward the door. "Anna," he said, not turning around. She stopped. "Yes, Mr. Walker? How long have you worked here?" "Almost 2 weeks, sir." 2 weeks. 14 days since his entire world had tilted on its axis. "Why do you always hum when you work?" A pause. "It keeps me company, sir. My grandmother taught me those songs when I was little. They remind me I'm not alone." Paul's jaw clenched. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of revelation. "Neither am I. Not anymore." He heard her breath catch, heard the confusion in her silence. Then her footsteps retreated quickly, and he was alone again. Paul turned slowly, staring at the spot where she'd stood on the ladder. His chest heaved. His hands curled into fists at his sides. At the gala, surrounded by calculated beauty, he'd felt nothing. But here, in his own home, with a woman in a cleaning uniform humming gospel songs, his body roared to life. This wasn't random. This wasn't circumstantial. This wasn't even logical. Paul walked to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass, his breath fogging the surface. "This isn't desire," he whispered to the sleeping city below, his voice breaking with the truth he could no longer deny. "This is destiny." And destiny, he was beginning to realize, was far more terrifying than any business rival he'd ever faced. The collision happened on a Tuesday afternoon when Paul returned home early from a board meeting he'd left abruptly. Unable to concentrate on quarterly projections, when all he could think about was whether Anna would be there. She was. He found her in the hallway outside his private study, her cleaning cart positioned against the wall. She was wiping down the ornate mirror that hung between 2 abstract paintings, her movements methodical and careful. Paul stopped walking. He couldn't help himself. He simply stood there, 15 feet away, watching her work. The way afternoon light caught in her hair. The graceful efficiency of her movements. The quiet dignity in how she approached even the smallest task. Anna must have sensed his presence because she glanced at the mirror's reflection and saw him standing there. Her hand stilled on the glass. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Anna set down her cloth with deliberate precision, turned to face him fully, and spoke the words that shattered the fragile silence they'd been maintaining. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. "Why do you look at me like that?" Paul's breath caught. "Like what?" "You know exactly like what, sir." Her accent thickened slightly with emotion. "Every time I turn around, you're there. Watching. Staring. Like I'm." She struggled for words. "Like I'm something I'm not." "Anna." "No." She took a small step forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I need to understand what's happening. I need to know if I've done something wrong, if I've somehow offended you, because I can't work like this anymore. I can't walk through these hallways feeling your eyes on me every single moment. Paul's jaw tightened. He should deny it. Should apologize professionally and step back. Should do anything except what he did next. He walked toward her. Anna's eyes widened, but she held her ground, her chin lifting slightly despite the fear flickering across her face. You haven't done anything wrong, Paul said quietly, stopping just 2 feet away from her. Close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Close enough to smell the faint scent of coconut oil in her hair. Nothing at all. Then why? Because I can't help it. The admission tore from him like a confession. I've tried. God knows I've tried. Mr. Walker, I don't understand. Look at me, Anna, he commanded softly. She did, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath hitch. Raw hunger, desperate longing, something wild and barely restrained. This is madness, she whispered. You're my employer. I'm just. Don't. His voice sharpened. Don't diminish yourself. They stood in the charged silence, the air between them crackling with unspoken words. Paul's hands trembled at his sides, fighting the urge to reach for her. I should go, Anna said, but she didn't move. You should, Paul agreed. But he didn't step back. Anna turned toward her cleaning cart, reaching for the handle. At the same moment, Paul moved to step aside. Their hands brushed, her fingers grazing across his knuckles for less than a second. The effect was nuclear. Paul gasped audibly, his entire body jolting as though he'd touched live voltage. Heat exploded through him, fierce and overwhelming. His hand jerked away, but the sensation remained, burning across his skin, surging through his veins. Anna stumbled backward, her eyes wide with shock, pressing her hand against her chest as though trying to steady her racing heart. Did you feel that? Paul's voice was hoarse, almost desperate. She stared at him, lips parted, unable to speak. But the answer was written clearly across her face. Yes, she'd felt it too. Anna, The sharp click of heels on marble interrupted him. They both turned toward the sound. One of the housekeepers appeared at the end of the hallway, carrying fresh linens. She stopped when she saw them, her expression shifting from neutral to curious. Excuse me, the woman said carefully. I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting anything, Anna said quickly, too quickly. She grabbed her cart and pushed it past Paul, her head down, her movements hurried. Paul watched her retreat, his hand still tingling where her skin had touched his chest heaving with emotions he couldn't control and couldn't name. 40 floors below, in the building's administrative offices, Vanessa Cole sat at her desk, her fingers drumming against the polished surface. The email she'd sent days ago had done its work. Whispers had begun circulating through the company. Questions were being asked, but whispers weren't enough. She needed proof. That afternoon, she'd invented a reason to visit the penthouse. A contract that supposedly needed Paul's immediate signature. Margaret had approved the visit, unaware of Vanessa's true intentions. When she'd stepped off the elevator, she'd heard voices. Paul's deep timbre. A softer female voice, accented and uncertain. Vanessa had moved quietly down the corridor, staying just out of sight, her phone already in her hand. What she witnessed made her breath catch with vindictive satisfaction. Paul Walker, the man who'd never shown interest in anyone, who'd rejected her subtle advances without even acknowledging them, stood inches from a cleaning woman, staring at her with an expression Vanessa had never seen on his face before. Hunger, desperation, obsession. She'd raised her phone carefully, zooming in, and captured the moment perfectly. Paul's intense gaze fixed on Anna, his body leaning toward her, every line of his posture screaming barely restrained desire. Anna's face visible in profile, her expression confused and conflicted. Vanessa had snapped 3 photos before retreating silently back to the elevator. That evening, Anna knelt on her prayer mat in her small apartment, her hands shaking as she pressed them together. "Father, help me," she whispered. "I don't know what to do. I don't know what's happening." The touch had felt like fire, brief and accidental, yet it had sent shockwaves through her entire body. Even now, hours later, her hand still tingled where his skin had met hers. And his eyes, the way he'd looked at her when he said, "I can't help it." No man had ever looked at her like that, with such raw, unfiltered need. "He's my boss," she reminded herself, her voice cracking. "He's rich. He's powerful. And I'm nothing. This can't happen. It shouldn't happen." But her treacherous heart whispered back, "Then why does it feel like the most real thing you've ever experienced?" Across the city, Paul stood in his darkened penthouse, staring at his right hand. The hand that had brushed against hers. The hand that still burned with the memory. He'd touched countless hands in his life. Business deals. Greetings. Social niceties. Never once had a simple touch affected him like this. His phone buzzed. A text from his CFO about the abandoned board meeting. Paul ignored it. All he could think about was Anna's face when their hands had touched. The shock in her eyes. The way she gasped. The way her entire body had trembled. She'd felt it too. That electric current. That undeniable pull. Paul closed his eyes, his voice barely a whisper in the empty room. "What are you doing to me?" In her apartment across town, Vanessa Cole sat at her laptop, staring at the photo on her screen. Paul and Anna, captured in that moment of tension and longing. She attached it to an email, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The recipient list included 5 key people. The head of HR, 2 board members, a senior VP, and the building's property manager. Subject line: urgent concern regarding Mr. Walker's conduct. She typed quickly. "I believe everyone should be aware of the inappropriate relationship developing between Mr. Walker and one of the cleaning staff." Photo attached. "This requires immediate attention." Her cursor hovered over the send button. 1 click. That's all it would take to detonate this carefully built bomb. Vanessa smiled, her finger pressing down. Sent. The war had begun. And Paul Walker had no idea the first missile had already been launched. The email detonated like a bomb across Walker Technologies and the residential building's management. By Wednesday morning, the photo had been forwarded 17 times. By noon, nearly everyone who worked in or around Paul Walker's orbit had seen it. The image was damning in its simplicity. Paul standing inches from Anna, his body angled toward her, his expression raw with longing. Her face captured in profile, uncertainty and something else, something vulnerable, written across her features. The whispers began immediately. Anna noticed it first in the break room reserved for cleaning staff. She'd entered to refill her water bottle when 2 other maids stopped talking abruptly, their eyes sliding toward her with expressions that made her stomach clench. "Anna," one of them said, her voice artificially sweet. "How nice of you to join us." The other woman smirked. "I'm surprised you have time for breaks. Doesn't Mr. Walker keep you very busy?" Anna's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." "Oh, I think you understand perfectly," the first woman said, crossing her arms. "We all saw the photo. The way he looks at you. The way you've somehow gotten special treatment around here." "What photo? What are you talking about?" The second woman pulled out her phone, tapping the screen before turning it toward Anna. "This photo." Anna's blood ran cold. There she was, standing in the hallway with Mr. Walker. The image capturing a moment that looked far more intimate than it had felt. Her hand flew to her mouth. That wasn't." "Sure it wasn't," the first woman said, her tone dripping with mockery. "You just happened to catch the eye of a billionaire. How convenient." "The billionaire's weakness," the other one laughed. "That's what they're calling you. Did you plan it? The innocent act. The shy routine." "No," Anna's voice cracked. I would never." "Save it," the first woman said, brushing past her roughly. "We all know how women like you operate. But trust me, honey, men like Paul Walker don't marry the help. They use them and throw them away." Their laughter echoed down the hallway as they left, leaving Anna trembling by the water cooler, tears burning behind her eyes. Across town, Paul sat in the Walker Technologies boardroom, surrounded by 8 stone-faced board members. The emergency meeting had been called without his approval. A power play that set his teeth on edge the moment he walked in. "Gentlemen," he said coldly, taking his seat at the head of the table. "This better be important." Richard Morrison, the eldest board member and largest shareholder after Paul, slid a tablet across the polished mahogany surface. "I think you'll find it is." Paul picked up the device. The photo filled the screen. His jaw clenched so tightly he felt something pop. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" Another board member, James Chen, asked. "What matters is that it exists, and that it's circulating through the company like wildfire. My private life stops being private when it affects this company's reputation," Morrison interrupted sharply. "You're the face of Walker Technologies. Your decisions reflect on all of us. And this," he gestured at the tablet, "is a PR nightmare waiting to explode." "Nothing happened," Paul said flatly. "That photo suggests otherwise," Chen countered. "And the rumors are worse. They're saying you're having an inappropriate relationship with a member of the cleaning staff." A woman young enough to be. Finish that sentence carefully. Paul growled, his eyes dangerous. The room fell silent for a beat. Morrison leaned forward. Paul, we're not here to attack you. We're here to protect what you've built. But you need to understand the position this puts us in. If this leaks to the media, the shareholders will panic. Our stock price could tank. Competitors will smell blood. So what are you suggesting? Terminate her employment, Morrison said bluntly. Immediately. Issue a statement that the photo was taken out of context. Distance yourself completely. Paul's hands curled into fists beneath the table. No. Excuse me. I said no. I will not fire her based on gossip and a photograph that shows nothing but two people having a conversation. Paul, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, he interrupted, his voice like steel. What's unreasonable is this tribunal over my personal life. Chun leaned forward. Then let us be perfectly clear. If you don't handle this situation, we'll be forced to call for a vote of no confidence. You could lose your position as CEO. Is a cleaning woman really worth your entire empire? The question hung in the air like poison. Paul stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. This meeting is over. Paul, I said it's over. He strode toward the door, then paused, turning back. And if anyone in this room forwards that photo one more time, or spreads one more word of gossip about Ms. Sinclair, you'll be hearing from my lawyers. All of you. He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the framed awards on the walls. Anna barely made it through the rest of her shift. Everywhere she went, she felt eyes on her, heard whispers that stopped when she approached, saw smirks and knowing glances. In the elevator, 2 building security guards went silent when she stepped in, then resumed their conversation the moment she left, their laughter following her down the hall. By 4 o'clock, the building manager called her into his office. Ms. Sinclair, he said, not meeting her eyes. We've received some concerning reports about your conduct. My conduct? Anna's voice shook. Sir, I've done nothing wrong. I clean, I work hard, There's been a photo circulating. I'm sure you're aware. Heat flooded her cheeks. That photo is misleading. Mr. Walker and I were simply. I don't need the details, he interrupted. What I need is for this situation to go away. Human Resources is reviewing your employment. Until they make a decision, you're being placed on administrative leave. The words hit her like a physical blow. You're firing me? I'm saying that your position here may no longer be viable. We'll contact you when a decision has been made. Anna stood on shaking legs. Her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall in front of him. I need this job. My family. I'm sorry, Miss Sinclair. That will be all. She walked out in a daze, her mind spinning. She couldn't lose this job. The money she sent home to Jamaica kept her mother and brother fed, kept her brother in school. Without it, she couldn't think, couldn't breathe. She needed somewhere to hide, somewhere away from the stares and whispers and cruel laughter. The janitor's closet on the 42nd floor. Small, dark, rarely used. She slipped inside, closing the door behind her, and finally let the tears come. Great, gasping sobs that she tried to muffle with her hands. Her back slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, her uniform dampening with tears. I'm sorry, Mama, she whispered brokenly. I'm so sorry. I tried to be good. I tried to stay invisible. She didn't hear the door open, didn't realize she wasn't alone until a familiar voice, rough with emotion, spoke her name. Anna. Her head snapped up. Paul Walker stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lights, his expression devastated as he took in her tear-stained face, her trembling shoulders, her broken posture. For a moment, neither moved. Then Paul stepped inside and closed the door behind him, sealing them both in the small, dim space. What did they do to you? He asked, his voice barely controlled. Anna couldn't speak, could only shake her head as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Paul knelt in front of her, his expensive suit forgotten, his hands hovering near her shoulders but not quite touching, as though afraid she might shatter. Tell me, he demanded softly. Tell me everything. And in that tiny closet, surrounded by mops and cleaning supplies, Anna finally broke, whispering the truth of what his world had done to hers. The storm rolled into Manhattan like divine judgment, dark clouds swallowing the October sky by late afternoon. By evening, rain lashed against the windows of Paul's penthouse with violent intensity, and thunder rumbled through the steel and glass canyon of the city. Anna had been reinstated that morning after Paul made 3 phone calls that left the building manager stammering apologies. But the damage had been done. The whispers continued. The stares persisted. And the space between Paul and Anna had grown even more charged, more dangerous. She'd requested the late shift deliberately, hoping to avoid the other staff. By 9 o'clock, the penthouse was supposed to be empty. Paul had a dinner meeting downtown that would keep him away until midnight. Or so she'd thought. Anna moved through the massive living room, her mop gliding across the marble floors, trying to lose herself in the rhythm of work. Outside, lightning fractured the sky, illuminating the city in stark flashes of white. The lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the penthouse plunged into darkness. Anna gasped, her hand tightening on the mop handle. Emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, casting everything in dim, eerie shadows. The storm howled against the windows like something alive and angry. She should leave. Come back tomorrow. But the thought of facing the crowded subway in this weather, of standing on the platform while people whispered and stared. No, she'd finish her work. Hide here in the quiet until the storm passed. She was wringing out the mop in the utility sink when she heard it. The private elevator chiming. Footsteps on marble. Her heart lurched. Anna. Paul's voice cut through the darkness, rough and urgent. She turned to see him emerge from the shadows, and her breath caught. He was drenched. His white dress shirt clung to his muscular frame, transparent with rain. His dark hair dripped water down his face. His tie was gone, his jacket abandoned somewhere. He looked wild, undone. Nothing like the controlled billionaire she'd grown accustomed to. Mr. Walker, she managed, her voice barely audible over the storm. I thought you were. The dinner was canceled, he said, moving toward her. Flooding downtown. I came back early. Lightning flashed, throwing his face into sharp relief. His eyes were intense, almost feverish. The power's out, Anna said unnecessarily, taking an instinctive step back. I should probably. Don't. The single word stopped her. Don't run from me. Not tonight. Sir, Paul. His voice was almost pleading. Say my name, Anna. Not sir. Not Mr. Walker. Just Paul. Thunder crashed directly overhead, shaking the windows. Anna flinched, and in that moment of distraction, Paul closed the distance between them. I can't do this anymore, he said, his voice raw with emotion. I can't pretend. I can't maintain the distance. I can't. He ran a hand through his wet hair, water droplets scattering. God help me, I can't stay away from you. Paul, please. Do you know what it's like? He continued, the words pouring out like a dam breaking. 5 years. 5 years of feeling nothing. No desire. No stirring. No response to anyone. Doctors couldn't explain it. Therapists couldn't fix it. I thought I was broken. Permanently. Irreparably. Anna's back pressed against the counter, her hands gripping the edge. You don't have to tell me this. Yes, I do. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something between a whisper and a confession. Because you need to understand. My body only comes alive when I see you. The words hung in the charged air between them. That's not possible, Anna whispered. That doesn't make sense. I know. A bitter laugh escaped him. I've tested it. God, I've tested it. Surrounded myself with the most beautiful women money can access. Felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. But one glimpse of you humming in my hallway, one accidental brush of your hand, and my entire body roars to life like I'm being resurrected. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the agony on his face. You think I wanted this? He continued. You think I chose to become obsessed with a woman I have no right to want? You're my employee, Anna. You're young. You're innocent. You're everything I should stay away from. But I can't. His voice cracked. I physically cannot make myself stop wanting you. Tears gathered in Anna's eyes. This will destroy both of us. I know. Your empire, your reputation, everything you've built. I don't care. The fierce certainty in his voice made her tremble. I spent 5 years as a dead man walking. I had everything the world says should matter. And it meant nothing. Nothing. But you. He paused, his chest heaving. You make me feel human again. Paul, I'm scared. The admission tore from her. I'm scared of what people say. Of what this means. Of how you make me feel when I know I shouldn't. You feel it too. Not a question. A statement. Anna's tears spilled over. Yes, she whispered. God forgive me, yes. Every time you look at me, I feel like I'm on fire. Every time you're near, my heart races so fast I think it might stop. And I pray for strength to resist it, but Thunder crashed, drowning out her words. But what? Paul pressed, his voice urgent. But I don't want to resist anymore. The confession came out broken, terrified. And that terrifies me more than anything. For a moment, they simply stared at each other in the storm-shadowed darkness. The truth finally spoken aloud and hanging between them like a live wire. Then lightning struck, close, so close the entire penthouse blazed white, and the thunder followed instantly, deafening and absolute. In that flash of electric light, Paul saw everything. Her tears, her fear, her longing, the war raging behind her eyes. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he lifted his hand toward her face. Anna's breath hitched. She could stop this. Should stop this. One word, one step backward, and the moment would pass. But she didn't move. Paul's fingers brushed against her cheek, his touch feather-light, reverent. His thumb traced the path of her tears, wiping them away with heartbreaking tenderness. The effect was cataclysmic. Anna's eyes fluttered closed as sensation crashed through her. Paul's entire body shuddered, his hand trembling against her skin. The same electricity that had sparked between them before now felt like lightning itself coursing through their connection. "Anna," he breathed, his forehead lowering until it nearly touched hers. Her hands rose of their own accord, pressing flat against his chest. Through the wet fabric of his shirt, she felt his heart hammering wildly, matching the rhythm of her own. "This changes everything," she whispered. "I know. We can't go back. I don't want to." Another flash of lightning illuminated them. Two figures pressed together in the darkness, the storm raging around them, the world outside forgotten. Paul's hand slid from her cheek to cup the back of her neck, his fingers tangling gently in her hair. Anna's hands fisted in his shirt, no longer pushing away but pulling closer. The space between them disappeared to nothing. "Tell me to stop," Paul whispered against her lips, his voice wrecked. "Tell me this is wrong. Tell me you don't want this." Anna opened her eyes, meeting his gaze in the dim emergency lighting. Her voice, when it came, was steady despite her tears. "I can't, because I'd be lying." Thunder shook the penthouse. Lightning turned the world white. And in that moment of electric illumination, Paul Walker's lips finally claimed Anna Sinclair's. 5 years of numbness shattering in a single, devastating kiss that tasted like rain and redemption, and the beginning of everything that would either save them or destroy them both. The storm raged on, indifferent to the two souls inside who had just crossed a line from which there would be no return. The footage appeared online at 6:47 a.m. on a Friday morning, uploaded anonymously to a gossip site notorious for exposing the private lives of the wealthy and powerful. 32 seconds of security camera footage from the penthouse building. Paul Walker, tech billionaire worth an estimated $4.2 billion, standing in a hallway watching a young black woman in a cleaning uniform. The way he looked at her was unmistakable, raw longing written across every line of his face, his body angled toward her as though pulled by invisible gravity. The caption read, "The cold king of Manhattan's secret obsession. Billionaire Paul Walker can't take his eyes off his Jamaican janitor." By 7 a.m., it had been shared 10,000 times. By 8 a.m., every major news outlet in New York had picked up the story. By 9 a.m., it had gone global. Paul's phone began ringing at dawn. He ignored the first 3 calls, still half asleep, his mind hazily replaying the kiss from 2 nights ago. The taste of Anna's lips, the way she'd trembled in his arms before pulling away, terrified of what they'd done. The 4th call came from his CFO, Daniel Martinez, and the urgency in his voice cut through Paul's drowsiness like a blade. "Turn on the news. Now." Paul grabbed the remote, and his blood turned to ice. His face filled the screen. The footage played on loop while a panel of commentators dissected every frame. Clearly inappropriate power dynamic. Predatory behavior toward vulnerable employees. Another billionaire who thinks his money exempts him from basic decency. The screen split to show Anna's employee photo, pulled from building records. Her gentle face, her shy smile, now broadcast to millions. Paul's phone exploded with notifications. Texts, emails, missed calls stacking up like dominoes. He dialed Anna immediately. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. "Anna, if you get this, don't leave your apartment. Don't talk to anyone. I'm handling this. I promise you, I'm handling this." But even as he said it, he wondered if that promise was one he could keep. By 10 a.m., Walker Technologies stock had dropped 12%. By 11, it was down 20. Shareholders were panicking. The board was in emergency session. And outside Paul's building, news vans lined the street 3 deep. Paul's legal team gathered in his penthouse conference room. 6 attorneys in expensive suits, all talking at once. Crisis management firm can spin this. Issue a statement denying any inappropriate relationship. Distance yourself immediately. Enough. Paul's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. I'm not denying anything. His lead attorney, Catherine Wright, stared at him. Excuse me. I'm not issuing a denial. I'm not distancing myself. And I'm not throwing her to the wolves to save my reputation. Paul, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. What's unreasonable is expecting me to lie about the best thing that's happened to me in 5 years. The room fell silent. Catherine leaned forward, her voice careful. Paul, I've known you for 15 years. I've seen you build this empire from nothing. But if you go public defending this relationship, you'll lose everything. The board will force you out. Your investors will abandon you. Your reputation will be destroyed. Then let it be destroyed. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. He stood, his jaw set. Schedule a press conference. Today, 2 p.m. Paul, I strongly advise against. I'm not asking for advice. I'm telling you what's happening. Make it happen. Anna sat on the floor of her apartment, her phone in pieces on the coffee table. She'd smashed it after the first reporter called, after the 100th text from numbers she didn't recognize, after her phone had become a weapon aimed at what little privacy she had left. Her mother had called from Jamaica on the landline, crying, Annie, what's happening? Your face is on the news. They're saying terrible things. It's not true, Mama, Anna had whispered. Not the way they're saying it. But wasn't it? Hadn't she kissed him? Hadn't she wanted him? Hadn't she crossed every line she'd sworn to protect? A knock at her door made her jump. She ignored it. Another knock, more insistent. Anna, it's Paul. Please open the door. Her heart lurched. She shouldn't. She should leave the door closed, end this before it consumed them both. But she opened it anyway. Paul stood in the hallway wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, his jaw tight with tension. The moment their eyes met, something cracked in his expression. Are you okay? He asked. Anna laughed bitterly. Am I okay? Paul, my face is on every television in America. They're calling me a seductress, a gold digger, I know. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. And I'm ending it. Today. You can't end this. The damage is done. Not the story. The hiding. He took her hands, his grip firm and warm. I'm holding a press conference in 2 hours. I'm telling them the truth. Terror flooded through her. No. Paul, no. That will only make it worse. It can't get worse than this. You being attacked while I hide behind lawyers and PR statements. His voice was fierce. I won't do it, Anna. I won't let you face this alone. You'll lose everything. I already told you. I don't care about everything. I care about you. The press conference was held in the Walker Technologies lobby. Cameras from every major network pointed at the podium like weapons. Reporters packed the space, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of shouted questions. Paul stood backstage, his attorneys making last-minute pleas. It's not too late to reconsider. Read a prepared statement. At least let us vet what you're going to say. Paul ignored them all. His eyes were fixed on the monitor showing the crowd of journalists, hungry for blood. Catherine touched his arm. Paul, please. Think about what you're doing. I have. He straightened his tie. For once in my life, I'm thinking about what actually matters. He walked onto the stage. The roar of questions was deafening. True about the inappropriate relationship. Power dynamic concerns. Respond to allegations. Paul stood at the podium, waiting for silence. When it finally came, heavy and expectant, he spoke. I'm not here to issue denials or make excuses. I'm here to tell you the truth. Cameras flashed like lightning. For 5 years, I've suffered from a condition that no doctor could explain and no treatment could fix. I felt nothing. No desire. No physical response to anyone, regardless of their beauty or availability. I was convinced I was permanently broken. The room was utterly silent now. Until I met Anna Sinclair. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Yes, she works in my building. Yes, she's younger than me. Yes, there's a professional power dynamic. And yes, I am completely, irrevocably drawn to her in ways I cannot fully explain or control. Mr. Walker, are you confirming? I'm confirming that this woman awakened something in me that I thought was dead forever. She didn't seduce me. She didn't pursue me. She simply existed, and somehow, that was enough to make me feel human again. The reporters were scrambling, their fingers flying over devices. Paul's voice strengthened. You want to call this a scandal? You want to reduce her to a headline? But I'm telling you right now. The conference room door opened. Anna stepped through. Every camera swiveled toward her. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, her face bare of makeup. She looked terrified but resolute. Paul's expression transformed at the sight of her. He descended from the podium, walking directly to where she stood frozen at the edge of the room. Anna, you don't have to. Yes, I do, she said quietly. If you're going to face this, I'm not letting you face it alone. He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. The cameras exploded with flashes. Together, they walked back to the podium. Paul looked directly into the cameras, his hand still holding Anna's, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. She is not my scandal, he said clearly. She is my cure, and I will not apologize for finally feeling alive. The room erupted into chaos. Questions shouted, cameras flashing, reporters surging forward. But Paul only looked at Anna, his thumb brushing across her knuckles, his eyes asking a silent question. Are you with me? Through her tears, Anna nodded. And as the world watched, judged, and exploded around them, two people stood at the center of the storm, holding onto each other like the only solid thing left in a world gone mad. The press conference changed everything and nothing at all. The media firestorm intensified. Cable news ran 24-hour coverage dissecting every frame of footage, every word Paul had spoken, every angle of Anna's tearful face. Think pieces flooded the internet. Twitter exploded into warring factions. The story dominated headlines across 3 continents. Walker Technologies' stock continued its freefall. By Monday morning, it had dropped 38%. Shareholders demanded emergency meetings. Major investors threatened to pull funding. Corporate partners issued carefully worded statements about reviewing their relationships with the company. The board convened at dawn. Paul sat at the head of the conference table one last time, his expression calm despite the chaos raging around him. 8 board members stared at him with varying degrees of anger, disappointment, and barely concealed satisfaction. Richard Morrison spoke first, his voice cold. I hope you understand what you've done. I do, Paul said simply. Billions in shareholder value. Gone. Our reputation. Damaged beyond repair. Strategic partnerships. Crumbling. Morrison leaned forward. All because you couldn't control yourself around a cleaning woman. Paul's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. Watch how you speak about her. This is exactly the problem, James Chin interjected. You've lost all perspective. You've prioritized a personal infatuation over the company, over your responsibilities, over everything we've built together. Everything I've built, Paul corrected quietly. This company exists because of my vision, my code, my sleepless nights. Not yours. And it will die because of your recklessness, Morrison shot back. Paul stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. Then let me make this easy for all of you. He placed a manila envelope on the table. My resignation as CEO, effective immediately. I'm also selling my controlling shares. Not all at once, to avoid further market panic, but gradually over the next 6 months. By this time next year, I will have no operational role in Walker Technologies. Stunned silence filled the room. You're serious? Chin stammered. Completely. Paul's voice was calm, almost peaceful. I built this company from nothing. I know its value. And I know it will survive without me. Perhaps it will even thrive. Paul, if you'd just... I'm done. He picked up his briefcase. My attorneys will handle the transition. I suggest you start interviewing candidates for CEO. He walked toward the door, then paused, turning back one final time. I spent 5 years chasing wealth I didn't need, building an empire that never filled the emptiness inside me. You're right, I did lose perspective. But not in the way you think. I finally found what actually matters. The door closed behind him with quiet finality. Richard Morrison stared at the envelope, then at the closed door, shaking his head slowly. He's thrown everything away, he muttered. Everything. For a woman he barely knows. But in the hallway outside, Paul Walker felt lighter than he had in a decade. Anna stood in her small apartment, her suitcase open on the bed, tears streaming down her face as she folded her few belongings with trembling hands. She'd made her decision in the dark hours of the morning, watching news coverage that painted her as either a victim or a manipulator, never simply as a woman who'd fallen in love with the wrong man at the wrong time. Paul had sacrificed everything for her. His company, his reputation, his fortune. The empire he'd spent 15 years building had crumbled in a week because he'd refused to deny what he felt for her. She couldn't let him lose anything more. Her phone, a new one, number unlisted, buzzed with a text from Paul. "Where are you? We need to talk." She didn't respond. Couldn't. If she heard his voice, she'd break. Another text. "Anna, please. Don't shut me out." She turned off the phone, zipping her suitcase closed with shaking hands. The cab to JFK Airport felt like a funeral procession. Manhattan's skyline disappeared behind her, and with it, the impossible dream of a life she'd never been meant to have. At the airport, she checked in for the evening flight to Kingston. Her mother had wired money for the ticket, money they couldn't afford, but family was family. She'd go home, help in her uncle's shop, forget the man whose eyes had made her believe, briefly, that fairy tales could be real. She was sitting at the gate, boarding pass clutched in her numb fingers, when she heard his voice. "Anna." Her head snapped up. Paul stood 20 feet away, disheveled in a way she'd never seen him. His shirt was untucked, his hair uncombed, his eyes wild with something between panic and determination. "No," she whispered, standing quickly. "No, Paul, you can't be here. You were going to leave." He moved toward her slowly, as though approaching something fragile. "Without saying goodbye. Without giving me a chance to. There's nothing left to say." Her voice cracked, drawing stares from other passengers. "You lost everything because of me. Your company, your reputation, billions of dollars. I don't care about any of that." "Well, I do." Tears streamed down her face. "I care that you ruined your life for a woman you barely know. I care that 5 years from now, you'll wake up and regret." "Stop." He closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face with devastating gentleness. "Listen to me very carefully, Anna Sinclair. I didn't lose everything. I chose to walk away from things that never mattered in the first place. Your empire was making me miserable. I was building castles in a desert, dying of thirst while surrounded by wealth that meant nothing." His thumbs brushed away her tears. "You gave me water, Anna. You gave me life. You'll change your mind. When the dust settles, when reality hits. The reality is that I spent 5 years as a dead man. Rich, powerful, successful, and completely hollow inside. Do you understand what that's like? To have everything the world says should make you happy and feel absolutely nothing." Anna's breath hitched as he continued, his voice raw with emotion. "Then you walked into my hallway humming a hymn, and suddenly I could breathe again. My heart remembered how to beat. My body remembered what it meant to be alive." His forehead pressed against hers. "You didn't ruin my life. You saved it. Paul, come with me," he whispered. "Not back to Manhattan. Not to press conferences and board meetings, and the wreckage of everything that just burned down. Come with me somewhere quiet. Somewhere real. Somewhere we can figure out what comes next." "Where?" A small smile touched his lips. "You once told me about Jamaica. About the beach where your grandmother used to take you. About white sand and turquoise water and palm trees swaying in the wind." Fresh tears spilled down Anna's cheeks. "You remember that?" "I remember everything you've ever told me." He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "Show me your home, Anna. Show me where you learned to hum those hymns. Show me what matters to you, so I can build a new life around the only thing that's ever actually mattered. You." "This is insane," she whispered. But her hands were clutching his shirt, holding on rather than pushing away. "Probably," he agreed. "But I've been sane and miserable. I'd rather be insane and alive." The airport PA system crackled. "Final boarding call for Flight 447 to Kingston, Jamaica." Paul's eyes didn't leave hers. "What do you say, Anna Sinclair? Will you let me follow you home?" She should say no. Should protect him from himself, from the consequences of loving her. But when she opened her mouth, only one word emerged, barely a whisper. "Yes." 6 months later. The beach stretched endlessly in both directions, white sand glowing under the Caribbean sun. Turquoise waves lapped gently at the shore. Palm trees swayed in the warm breeze, their fronds rustling like whispered prayers. Paul Walker stood barefoot in the sand, wearing simple linen pants and a white shirt, his feet sinking into the warmth. Beside him, Anna wore a flowing ivory dress, her hair loose and crowned with white flowers, her face radiant with joy. Before them, a local minister smiled warmly. Behind them, a small gathering. Anna's mother and brother, tears streaming down their faces. A handful of friends from the village. Paul's former assistant Margaret, who'd flown in specifically for this, crying into a handkerchief. No cameras. No reporters. No board members or shareholders or society pages. Just two people, a beach, and a love that had cost them everything and given them more. By the power vested in me, the minister said in his lilting accent, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Paul's hands cupped Anna's face, his touch achingly gentle, and when their lips met, the small gathering erupted in cheers that were swallowed by the sound of waves and wind and the distant cry of seabirds. When they pulled apart, both were crying and laughing simultaneously. That evening, as the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, Paul and Anna walked hand in hand along the shore. The wedding guests had dispersed. The world had grown quiet. Anna leaned her head against his shoulder. Do you miss it? Manhattan, the company, the penthouse. Paul was quiet for a moment, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Then he smiled, his arm tightening around her waist. The world thought I lost everything, he said softly. The media called it the greatest fall from grace in corporate history. They said I'd thrown away billions for an obsession, that I'd destroyed myself for a woman who wasn't worth it. He stopped walking, turning to face Anna fully, his hand rising to cradle her cheek as the golden light bathed them both. But in truth, his voice caught with emotion, his eyes shining with tears and something far deeper than happiness. Something like peace, like purpose, like finally understanding the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. In truth, I didn't lose anything. I found what makes a man truly alive. Anna's tears fell freely as she pulled him close, their silhouettes merging against the sunset. Two souls who'd defied the world to find each other, who'd sacrificed empires to build something infinitely more valuable. Love. Real, impossible, life-giving love. And as the Caribbean waves sang their ancient song and the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Paul Walker, former billionaire, former CEO, former dead man, finally, gloriously, came fully alive. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.